also going to take some of yours tonight, so we're going to get right into it. I got a big two-part question about writing this screenplay with David. I want to know what idea number one was, the thing that started this all, but then I also want to know if the two of you had a great story moment, something you came up with that made the idea feel whole to you.
Well, here's how it started. I have a house not far from here in Los Feliz, just below Griffith Park, and my wife and I were away for a while, and we hired a house sitter, and she saw a ghost in the house. And this is somebody that we're inclined to take seriously. And so we did a little research and discovered that somebody had died in the house in the master bedroom. And in fact, our neighbor said this woman was killed by her daughter. The police said it was a suicide. This neighbor said it was not a suicide. So when I discovered this, I wondered, because I was the child of a mother who was a parapsychologist, what this woman, we gave her a name, Mimi, what she would think if she had new people showing up in her house, what she felt like was her house. That was the initial idea, and I wrote a handful of script pages describing the beginning. You're looking in a room, you're moving around, it's eye level, it seems to be a person, and cut to black, time shift, a new image, somebody's coming to show the house to a family. That's what I gave. David kept those handful of pages and said, do you think there's something here? And he said, I know what to do with this. And he took it and ran. And I didn't know what the ending was. Like, when I read the ending, I felt, oh, okay. I was going a different way. My attitude, I told him it was a family, but he surprised me.
He always keeps me on my toes. That's what it keeps me coming back to his movies and also yours. I have heard you say that you didn't think that this type of POV narrative would work. Clearly you have made a movie this way, and it does. And it was making me wonder, was there a single moment of making presence when even you stopped and went like, you know what, I was wrong, this is gonna work?
Well, my concern was an issue that I'd had with movies that were POV movies, in which you're only seeing the perspective of the lead character, but the lead character is a person that exists in this world, and the primal desire to see a reverse angle and look at the eyes of the person who's experiencing the story, I think is really hard to counteract. And so every time I've seen something in which that's the conceit, I tap out at a certain moment because I want the reverse angle. I felt we would get away with it here because partially through, 2/3 of the way through the first shot in the film, you realize there's nothing to cut to. There is no reverse angle. There's nothing there. It's a ghost. And so you drop that expectation. You stop wanting that because you realize there's no there. So we're just looking at this. So I felt like it should work. I felt like it should work, based on my allergic reaction to a different version of that.
Does having only one POV and very long shots make the edit easier, or are there some unique challenges that even that format poses?
No, we locked We locked like 2 hours after we wrapped. Having said that, while we were shooting, I did make one sort of structural move, which was the scene with Lucy Liu and her son in the kitchen, where she's like, anything I do for you, you know the scene, it's really uncomfortable. That used to come later, and I moved it way up, and I put it right after the phone call, where you realize there's something very sketchy going on with her at work. And so I took that scene of her being kind of inappropriately intimate with her son. It used to occur like well into the second act, and I moved it up. That was like that was the huge editing move.
There was something there. Bringing up Lucy makes me want to go to the cast next, and I'll stick with the whole POV aspect of this movie. When you are filming a movie with a cast this way, how do you, I guess, give them tips or tricks or prepare them in advance for what it will take to actually film something like this?
Well, look, they understood from reading the script what the directorial gimmick was, and that every scene was a single take. They knew that. So, and they were prepared, they knew their lines. Honestly, I was the one having performance anxiety, because if I made a mistake, we had to go again. So the number of times that I said, cut, I can do better, far outweighed any time that I cut because of something they did. They were ready. They were there, and I was constantly sort of trying to calibrate how the presence is learning to look at things. So luckily we designed the schedule so that we were shooting mostly in sequence. There are only 2 scenes that aren't in sequence. And the reason I wanted to do that was I felt it should it should evolve in how it's looking at things and what it's choosing to emphasize. And I felt like I could only figure that out day by day if we were going in sequence. And so it wasn't a long shoot, but it could have been even shorter if it had been scheduled like a traditional movie, where there's no consideration of things like this, of like a trajectory of understanding, of how we're going to do it. But this is the benefit of working independently, where nobody's telling you what to do and saying like, you can't schedule it like this, you gotta schedule it like that. We could just do whatever we wanted.
With that in mind, I had written down this quote you said in another interview, because one of the things I love about you as a filmmaker is your willingness to jump from big movies to small movies. And you were saying in this other interview that one informs the other. They inform the other in ways that can be surprising. So it did make me wonder with Presence, what is a surprising way that one of those bigger movies inform what we see here?
Well, an approach to the narrative, you know what I mean? Like to apply the sort of traditional storytelling structure that is a component of a commercially successful film to an independently financed small movie with a very specific sort of directorial conceit. That's how the big one influences the small one. This is where I approach, I should say. I didn't hire him, he did it on spec. the person who wrote Jurassic Park to go, will you write this script for a movie that we're gonna make for, $3 million in 3 weeks? You know what I mean? Based on an idea that I'm pitching you. That's the crossover, you know what I'm saying? Where you've got somebody with incredible sort of pure movie narrative skill working on a small film. So that's when people are like, this whole like, oh, one for them, one for me. I'm like, no, it's so much more, it's not that binary, like it's just not.
You do both types of movies, and just when you use the phrase one for them, one for me, I'm also thinking about all the things you produce for up and coming filmmakers, and that's another way you contribute big time to this industry. So just came to mind, we were talking about Divinity before, which I highly recommend. So thank you for all of that. You were talking a little bit before about how oftentimes it would be difficult for you to complete the scenes, not the actors. So I'm curious, of all the scenes that you had to film in this movie, which did you think was going to be the most difficult for you going into filming, and ultimately was it, or did a different one catch you by surprise?
Oh, well, clearly, the penultimate scene was the one I was most anxious about, and had the highest degree of probability that I would make a mistake, not the cast. Because you have to remember, if I'm, at any point in this movie, if the camera's going up or down the stairs, I'm operating the camera, and I'm looking at my feet, because if I don't, I'm gonna fall. And so based on a series of rehearsals, I'm just using sort of muscle memory to aim the camera where I think it should be. And there were many times when I would watch the playback and I would have cut somebody's head off, or I cut their feet off, or whatever, because while we were going up and down the stairs, I was looking at my feet. So it was, the number, I always, if there was a broken take, it was always because of me. It was never because of them. So that was weird. But I think also for the actors, kind of really pleasurable. You know what I mean? Like, because we never did another take because they did something wrong. It was always because I did something wrong. And so I think for them it was a little bit of like, yeah, see how it feels, you know? And I was like, yeah, I do. And so the other thing was, I bought these Red Wing boots before I shot Haywire, and I've worn them every day on set, on every film since then, no matter what the weather conditions. And to shoot this film, I had to wear these sort of like slippers with like rubber like grips on them. They were like, I don't know what they were. They were like boat shoes, I don't know. But I needed something with grab, and I needed something that was quiet. And it was really unnerving because I felt like these were my lucky boots. And I was worried, like, is this not gonna be a successful endeavor because I'm not wearing my boots? And so, and only somebody that thinks like that should make a movie with a ghost in it.
You brought them. Did you put them in the corner or something?
Oh yeah, no, I could see them. They were by the sound card. It was like, it was sad. It was really sad. But we got through it.
We're going to try to squeeze in an audience question or two. Before we do that, I'm going to ask you all to stay seated because we're trying to get in multiple Q&As tonight so we can keep this conversation going, just so we can zip out and get over there. So I'm just going to pick two people and feel really bad for everyone I don't pick. Your hand right here was the first one I saw, so let's go with you.
I was just curious, operating on this movie, does that change your directing style as compared to other movies where you're not operating the camera?
The question was about operating the camera and if his style changes on this movie versus his other films that he's started on.
Well, I'm usually operating. I mean, you know, that started happening around the time of Traffic, where I started acting as my own cinematographer, so I'm usually the principal operator. But this was uniquely intimate and complicated because I was really in the scenes with the actors, and I was really, at times, as you saw, like really close to them, really close to them. And I was fortunate in that they didn't seem bothered by that. I'm so impressed by what actors do, like their ability to sort of just block all that out and sort of just be the character, you know, while I'm occasionally, you know, 8 inches from their face with a camera. And then some of these scenes that go on and on. I mean, the camera that we shot with was not big. It's a Sony A7. It looks like a still camera. It's on a Ronin stabilizer. You know, the form factor, this is very, very small. It probably weighs 10, 12 pounds, which is not a lot until you try to hold it out from your body for 7 minutes, and then it starts to get weird. Like your arms turn to cement and you're like shaking. But I'm trying to be a part of the scene, and again, not ruin the scene because I can't hold the camera in the position that I want to hold it. So that next to last scene, there were a couple of takes where we got 8 minutes in and I made a mistake. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't like some movies I don't know if you guys, there was a movie that came out a couple of years ago called Athena, and it has this like unbelievable like 16-minute single shot that is beyond complex. And so we're not talking about that. But at the same time, we're you know, I'm asking a lot of the performers in that particular scene. It's very tricky, technically and emotionally. And so when I make a mistake, you know, I feel it, and I appreciate the effort that's being made. But you know, it's interesting. I would love to. Let's do a show of hands. I love show of hands.
I'll take that.
So somebody said to me the other day, in the course of talking about this movie, this is a very experimental film, and I was like, what? Because I felt like, in my mind, an experimental film is something in which you're not really sure what's happening. And I felt like this movie is very clear about what's happening. So can I see a show of hands of people that would describe this movie as experimental? It's like 5%. Yeah. Not that you're wrong. I just never looked at it that way. I felt this was a very mainstream ghost story. This is a very accessible genre that we were absolutely adhering to the kind of foundations of that. Although I felt David came up with a couple of wrinkles that were really interesting. The chief one being most ghost stories involve the haunting of something that has happened before. What if the timeline in that realm, it doesn't work that way and you're being haunted by something that hasn't happened yet? And I thought, oh, that's kind of fun. But I felt like I said, I feel like it's pretty clear. You know, experimental to me means like, I'm not sure what I just saw.
But then you photograph it in a unique and ambitious way. It becomes something one of a kind and wholly different than any ghost story we've seen before.
Well, there's a really rich I think, legacy of ghost stories. And I think there's a lot of potential in that space. But the weird thing is that David Kep and I have known each other for a long time. We actually, the year of Sex Lies at Sundance, David Kep had a movie there, Apartment Zero, that he co-wrote and produced, which is a really good movie. And so we've known each other a long time, and we almost made a ghost movie together in the mid-90s. We were gonna do a remake of this Universal movie called The Uninvited, which I still think is a fantastic title. And we had 2/3 of it figured out, and we couldn't figure out the third act. Like, we just couldn't figure it out. You know, it was all the Harold the Explainer stuff, and I didn't want to do that, and David's like, well, we've got to explain it. And I go, well, I don't like the explanation, and so we kind of walked away from that. And to save the friendship. And so I'm thrilled that we've been able to now work together and still be friends, because that doesn't always happen. People change. When you go into production, sometimes people change.
Creative partners and friends that have a movie they should be very proud of. I will say congratulations on Presence. Thank you for sharing some of your experience. Oh, I can do one more? Oh, great. Okay, one more audience question. I'm going right in the middle in the black shirt. Yeah, you.
So because the camera represents the ghost, throughout production, did you guys stay with a specific lens and focal length, or did it change scene to scene?
No, there was, the question was about lens. So it was a 14mm lens that fit on this Sony A7 camera, and that was the rule. This is how it looks at things, that's it. There's no other sort of angle of view other than this. And so, like I said, I did several tests with several different cameras. As it turned out, anything even remotely larger than this Sony A7 required a larger stabilization device for me to use, which meant I couldn't get back into the closet. And so that's what that practical, demand really determined what camera we were using and what stabilization device we were using. But I've seen this we did a screening last night, Thursday night, in New York at this like huge Dolby, HDR theater in New York, and seeing that image, when you see the size of this camera, it's ridiculous. Like, this technology is ridiculous. It's incredible. It was velvet. Like, it was just stunning. And so, this is the debate that we're all having, which is the technology is really advancing. Anybody who wants to go and make something can make something that looks really great for not a lot of money. So the means of making something are more accessible. It's harder and harder to get somebody to buy it or to watch it. You know what I mean? When I was coming up, it was really hard to get the money for something, but if you did, you probably were gonna get it bought or seen. Now it's like, not hard to make something, it's really hard to get somebody to buy it or to see it. So, I don't know. I guess it's an artist's job to adapt and figure it out. You just gotta figure it out.
I fear that is our cutoff. My apologies to anyone who raised their hand and didn't get I'm so sorry. I'm gonna say thank you all to everybody out there for being here tonight, and thank you so much for sharing some of your experience with us.
Thank you for coming out.